the Japanese sparrow is pretty much gone. And I really wasn't thinking about sparrows. I was like, where are, and I forgot their little name, you know, sparrows. There's just few little flocks running around there, and they're pretty much dead. Now, obviously, why are they dying? Well, the #1 food that sparrows eat are earthworms, right? They love earthworms. And so there are no robins in Japan. There's no, I mean, all the birds that eat earthworms are pretty much gone in Japan. Why is that? Well, I didn't realize until I was watching some documentaries on Rachel Carlson, who wrote the world-changing book in the 1960s called Silent Spring. A book that's been forgotten, a book that's been kind of like pushed to the side. It's not provided in education unless you're outside. The British get it, right? The Japanese are provided, even though it hasn't done much, right? Because they're provided in elementary school or a little bit. I mean, they provide a little glimpse of it. They're not provided the book, but they talk about Rachel Carson in the not elementary, junior high school Horizons 3 book. A little paragraph is in there. That's it. But there was a thesis that basically was the nail in the coffin for pesticides in the 1960s. The story goes, there's actually a professor from Michigan State University, and I can't think of his name. I apologize, but if you look at my, I'll link his, I'll link the video to this talk. But basically, he's the one who noticed the birds dying on campus, and he was he was also someone who was interested in bird watching. So he was like, why are the birds dying? So this was a biologist or entomologist or something, and basically what it turned out to be was the earthworms. What happens is, they design these pesticides not to kill the worm. Why? If they kill the worm, they would completely destroy agriculture, because the earthworm is the single most important, well, in this ecosystem, the earthworm is so damn important. Why? Because worm feces makes the best soil. You've probably heard of worm farms. I've got a worm farm going. And I just started one. So ultimately, if you kill the worm, so the one thing that these pesticide individuals do, and the reason why these are neurotoxins, a worm doesn't have a brain. So anything that has a sort of neuro component, and bees have a neuro component, obviously any mammal and any bird does too. So ultimately, they make sure that whatever they're putting out there is not going to kill the earthworm. However, what happens is these earthworms basically build more and more and more. So it doesn't kill them; they just become these, these carriers of these. This was DDT, and DDT was put through the same test as any other systemic pesticide. And DDT, for example, we put millions of tons of DDT into our environment, and it's never going to go. It doesn't go away. It's basically, it doesn't break down or anything else. It is always there. So ultimately, what's happened is, because of Japan is the #1 user of pesticides, their worms have become toxic things. And I'm actually going to go in here and look at worms, see if they have worms in here. This is I actually want to get worms and see if they have earthworms. Mimizu. Mimizu is the earthworm in Japanese. So let's check out this fish store and see if they got earthworms for my earth farm. So these earthworms, and let's find these earthworms. Konnichiwa. There's no one here. But I'm sure the earthworms, this is shrimp. Here probably. Konnichiwa. Mimizu. Hoshii.
ミミズ。
ミミズ。タイガーミミズ。タイガー。名前は鳥。トロミミズ。名前はタイガー。タイガーワームズ。見せて。これ、ストライプ。これ、I want earthworms. Other ones. No, these are mizu. These are, I want other, only these? earthworms. ここで earthworms.
これいい？
そうです。These are ミミズ。名前は何？ミミズ？名前は？
これは名前はね、石ゴカイ。
石ゴカイ。名前は？
これはミミズ。
これはミミズ。
島ミミズ。
島ミミズ。
これは船釣るやつ。これはキス釣るやつ。
はい、そう。これはね。
これ船。
これは欲しい。だからこれはミミズの農薬。でスタート新しい、これは大きいミミズ欲しいですか？
大何？大一番大きい。
これは小さいの。
大きいもうこれ以上大きいのないの。
大きいの嫌い。欲しい。僕の、あなたすみません、日本語上手でありません、あなたは大きいのミミズは欲しいですか？
魚釣るのに、これぐらいが一番いいと思いますけど。
これ
どう言ったらいい分かりにくいね。
いくら？
これね630円ですかね。630円。
何書いて630
円言うたらね、どう言ったらいいかな。これ500円100円、こんだけです。
So these are 630 yen.
はい。
How many?
これがこんだけです。
So 何っぽい？ 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. ここ How many?
いやわからんな。
いっぱい。これ10 is there 10? 何ミミズは
島ミミズ。
is there 10? 9? 20? 何 How many? 1, 2, 3 1, 2, 3,
ああ入ってる数ね、200匹ぐらい入ってるでしょ。200ぐらい。
20.
そう、それぐらい。
20.
いや20匹もっと入ってますよ。数えたことはないですけど、メーカーさんの言った通り。
高いでしょ。高い。
もっと小さいのと大きいのとあるんですけど、今はもう大きい。ちょっと待ってくださいね。だからちょっと待ってください。それ違うんです。
はい。
そしたらもうちょっと小さいのか。ああ、もう大きいのしかないな。
これは小さいでしょ。これは大きい。いや小さい。
今ね、もう小さいのないですわ。
小さいないです。
はい、もうこれしかないです。もうミミズもね、取る人がもうおらんです。結構入ってますよ。
これクレジットカード大丈夫？クレジットカード。
いや使えないです。
これは今日はお金ない。OK。あとでね。
もうちょっと行くとね、また釣るやつあるかもしらん。ただこのミミズナルテとか少ないけど、少ない。
はい、少ない。
はい。またなら後で。
OK、後でね。すいません。ありがとうね。
すいません。
So that little packet of worms, all right? はい、ありがとう。This little packet of worms was about $7, dude, and they were small. They were like minute. $7 for little worms. I'm gonna go dig up my own fucking worms. I'm not spending $7 for worms. And they were small. They were only like this thick. You saw them. So there's definitely a market for a worm farm in Fukui. So that is that's some good startup research right there. So anyway, going back to the whole worm thing. So those little guys there are loading up on all this systemic pesticides. Now, systemic pesticides represents a whole branch of super pesticides that were, you know, they were starting to be engineered in the 1970s, or thought up and everything else. I think, from what I understand, it was actually in Purdue University. I think it was Purdue that actually was the university that basically did the pioneering work on systemic pesticides. Now, what differentiates between pesticides like DDT and systemic pesticides, or the traditional ones, is something known as water soluble. Water soluble pesticides basically means this, is that they will dilute in water, right? They will, you know, whereas other pesticides will float on top, will not dilute. So what happens is, with water soluble pesticides, is they get into everything, because everything consumes water. I mean, we're over 90% water, 95%, 98% water. So worms or anything else that's water, that's living in the ground where these pesticides are putting down, are basically consuming them, right? And because these pesticides are engineered not to kill the earthworms, because if you kill the earthworms, then you're really screwing the world, right? So what happens is they become these little bombs, and birds and everything else basically come down, they eat the worms. They're one of the primary sources for sparrows and robins and everything else. These worms come up when it rains, and other time these birds come down, they load up on worms, boom, they're dead. So right now, you look around, there are no birds. There are no birds. There's a crow. Crows eat garbage. Crows don't eat worms, so they're okay. We have tons and tons of crows. But what I'm going to do is, to kind of show this, is I'm going to try to get a bird. I'm going to put him in a cage. I'm going to feed him worms and see if the little sucker dies or not. You know, if I can catch a baby crow or a young crow, that's gonna have to, you know, that'd be kind of cool. Or what we could do is do it with a chicken. I don't know if chickens eat, I guess chickens eat worms. The funny thing is this, that you'll find this interesting, is because when I was talking to Okura farm, Bokujo means cattle farm owner, Yamazuki-san. He was like, oh, it's because the houses don't have the shingling anymore, right? So they can't lay eggs, which to me is just kind of like, hey, let's come up with some crazy reason. I mean, there's tons of, you know, I'm sure that may have a small impact, but them eating toxic earthworms is the, you know, has to be the #1 reason why there are no sparrows or a lot of any other birds, you know, in Japan. And why am I the only guy, you know, making videos on it? If you type "no birds Japan," right, not one video about Japan's bird plight is out there. So I wish universities, I wish people would start studying the earthworms in Japan, especially in the rural areas. You know, I wish that the folks in Fukui would, you know, get active. I'm gonna pass this slow car. Good thing in Japan is there are very, very few police cars. So even though I've got a yellow line here, right, I can pass. Well, only because there's no police cars and I'm naughty. I just hate people who just drive like old ladies. And you're like, here you are, making videos, driving. I'm at a red light right now. That's why I'm looking at the camera. I tell you, if I didn't, I'd get so frustrated at, you know, at these slow grandmother-like drivers that we have in Japan that I'd probably wreck anyway. So, no birds in Japan. Me as an entrepreneur trying to bring awareness and also hopefully take advantage of the situation. I can't believe those earthworms are so expensive. I'm gonna get earthworms, Kazoo. I'm gonna sell them to him for, he's selling them for $6. I'm gonna sell them to him for half of that, for $4. I make $4 on a box of earthworms, right? Dude, that to me sounds awesome. I'm gonna get my little farm cooking now. Sweet. Anyway, I kind of digressed, talking about birds and everything else. But it's amazing that you just don't see any birds. Look, just, you know, it's summertime. There's no flocks of birds. Oh, there's one little sparrow. He's not died yet. And the difference is between the DDT and the systemic pesticides is that DDT was a probably in a ratio of consumption was a lot stronger, right? Systemic pesticides are, you know, you're not going to see the birds dying like with DDT because they're not going to get the load, I don't think. I think they're going to die, but not as, you know, as much. Plus, like, you're living in rural Japan, a fucking bird dies, it's gonna, odds are it's gonna die in a rice paddy. You're not gonna see it. Why would you die on a road? I mean, you would like, oh, I feel sick, let me go sit in a rice paddy where I have no predators and see what happens. I guess I could get like a little cat or something and feed a cat like earthworm food, right? Mix it in with his food, his cat food, and see what happens. Really load him up. How would you feel about that if I fed a cat earthworms? Would that be considered inhumane, feeding a cat earthworms that I know will probably end up killing the cat? Because ultimately that's what we're doing to all the other animals, and these fuckers out there, Monsanto, Bayer, they know this and they're doing it. And there's, you know, and we should bring legal, you know, fight these guys, you know, legal crime against them. That's what I think.